Will the European Central Bank end up holding XRP and other digital currencies? Think about it. Every time Christine Lagarde takes the mic, she makes it crystal clear they want nothing to do with Bitcoin. So what's catching their eye instead? That's exactly what I'm unpacking today. And by the way, something big is happening in the market right now. Bitcoin's making waves and the whole landscape is changing. Fresh XRP products are about to drop. ISO standards are right around the bend. Honestly, there's so much going on that I need to lay it all out for you. Enough talk. Let's jump in. Yeah, I know I repeated myself a bit just now, but that's how it goes. It's Tuesday and we've got ground to cover. Time to get rolling. Take a listen. In this matter that you referred to and whether reserves of central banks should or could include Bitcoins, I think there is a view around the table of the Governing Council and most likely the General Council as well, that reserves have to be liquid, that reserves have to be secure, that they have to be safe, that they should not be plagued by the suspicion of money laundering or other criminal activities. And as a result, I'm confident that that Bitcoins will not enter the reserves of any of the central banks of the General Council. I had a good conversation with my colleague from the Czech Republic, and I leave it to him to make whatever announcement he wants to make, but I'm confident that he's convinced, as we all are, of the necessity to have liquid, secure, and safe reserves. The whole Bitcoin situation boils down to one thing: its early days were messy, and those shadows still follow it around. Here's what happened. Bitcoin launched first, so naturally it became the go-to for anyone doing questionable transactions online. And you know what? That baggage hasn't disappeared. Institutions might be jumping on board now, and mainstream adoption is picking up steam. But the ECB? They're staying miles away from adding Bitcoin to their reserves. Which brings us to the big question. What's their next step? Because the digital shift is real, and it's happening fast. Central banks everywhere are rethinking what belongs on their balance sheets. Trump's floating the idea of tackling debt using Bitcoin and other digital currencies. So if the ECB won't touch Bitcoin, what will they actually do? Let's get into the details. Christine Lagarde, the president of the European Central Bank, has been explicit that neither she nor the ECB sees Bitcoin as inappropriate for central bank balance sheets, repeatedly citing its volatility, lack of intrinsic value, and regulatory uncertainty as reasons for this position. Instead, her attention has largely been focused on the foundational role of the digital euro and central bank digital currencies. The moment central bank digital currencies come up, there's one company crushing everyone else in this space. Ripple's running more pilots than anybody, 24 active tests. But here's the crazy part. We've only heard whispers about 6 or 7 of them. So what about the rest? When does the curtain get pulled back on those other 15 or 18 CBDC trials? I'm sitting here waiting for that announcement. Meanwhile, Lagarde keeps circling back to the digital euro. ECB's attitude towards Bitcoin and stable coins. Lagarde said Bitcoin lacks the underlying value. Already touched on this, she doesn't see it as digital gold. Everyone loves calling Bitcoin digital gold. And she's basically saying no, actual digital gold exists, and Bitcoin isn't it. Now here's the twist. Digital assets of interest are XRP and XLM. Unlike Bitcoin, digital assets such as XRP and XLM have surfaced as candidates to meet the ECB's requirements for institutional and reserve usage. The ECB published their checklist of what works for them and what gets rejected. XRP and XLM, they made the cut. Thanks to their regulatory compliance, operational reliability, and established partnership, that's a big deal. Meanwhile, Michael Saylor is out there telling the world to stack Bitcoin. What's his angle? Because this dude's chasing money, he wants to prove he's got it figured out. Now here's what's interesting. Ripple isn't running around telling people to throw their cash at XRP, but what they do say is pretty telling. They're out there building everything they've got with XRP as the foundation of the whole operation. And check this out, Ripple's literally buying XRP straight from the market to pump money into some of their ODL channels. So what's that showing us? XRP is honestly one of those unicorn assets that already has all the regulatory homework done. Compliance boxes checked, KYC and AML protocols built in, spot verification, yep, that too. And don't forget about the decentralized ID layer on there. Lagarde herself has not officially endorsed XRP, but under her leadership, the ECB has explored distributed ledger technology and conducted sandbox trials involving the XRP ledger. Look, think about who we're dealing with here. She's not exactly opening the doors to just anything without having legitimate grounds to back that decision. And guess what's happening as we speak? Real-world testing through Axiology. This stuff is literally part of the ECB's experimental phase for rolling out their digital euro. Whether it becomes one of the core technologies they actually adopt, that's still up in the air. XRP, particularly after its legal clarity in the US as a non-security, is seen in aligning with central bank priorities for speed, cost, and compliance international settlement. Alright, let's talk about what's really going down in crypto land right now. Markets are getting hammered. People are straight up freaking out. I've been scrolling through X and I'm seeing tons of people saying they're done with the market forever. And my take on this, if you can't stomach the wild swings that come with crypto, if you're not able to think 3, 5, maybe even 10 years down the road, then honestly crypto might not be your game. I've personally trained myself to stop checking XRP's price every single day because I know exactly what happens to me. When it's climbing, I'm pumped up like yes, we're crushing it right now. I'm on top of the world, and when it tanks I'm sitting there going seriously, here we go again. So here's what I'm telling you. Just breathe for a second, zoom out and wrap your head around the fact that this is a marathon, not a sprint. Getting real adoption happening, that takes years. Hammering out regulations and getting all these different jurisdictions to update their rulebooks, that's a slow grind too. Anyway, let's jump into this clip from Matt Coulomb. Listen to this. It's a generational opportunity, and to get in at these prices. How much of a long-term buy do you think this is? I think it's a generational opportunity for long-term investors. Whether you're looking at Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Solana, to double down on what Tom said about Ethereum specifically. Look, I think investors are very nervous broadly about the economy, about AI valuations, about tariffs, about the broad economy. You want to look for secular trends that are decoupled from that. Think regardless of what happens on the economy, in the next year stablecoins will grow tremendously. Think regardless of what happens tokenization, will maybe 10x in the next few years. Prediction markets are going to be huge, decentralized identity and digital identity are going to be huge. Ethereum lets you play those secular trends which are in this enormous growth phase, almost regardless of what's happening in the broader economy. So for me, it's really a generational opportunity, and to get in at these prices, I think really is almost a gift for long-term investors. It's tremendous opportunity. Alright, buckle up, this one's interesting. So our guy here has basically mastered the art of pretending XRP doesn't exist. But you know what, that's totally on brand for him. I get it, but here's the thing that's bugging me. You're throwing out Ethereum left and right. Solana is getting all this attention. Meanwhile, the third biggest player in the game is just sitting there being ignored. What's up with that? Right, props to you though, Matt. Anyway, moving on to the juicy part. 1.7 trillion. Citibank says liquidity squeeze for Bitcoin is ending. So in plain English, all this downward pressure that's been absolutely hammering Bitcoin looks like it's finally wrapping up, and we might actually see some green candles coming our way. But forget what I'm telling you. Let's actually watch the clip so you can form your own opinion. Take a listen to this. You're no dirt. Correct me if I have this wrong. We're trying to find explanations for what's going on with Bitcoin. Were you putting that on tightening liquidity? That is one of the explanations. There are a couple of things going on in Bitcoin that are interesting. First, there was a flash crash in early October, and that for Bitcoin itself, it was 14% move down over 2 days. Maybe not that drastic, but some of the altcoins really got sold much harder. And after this flash crash, we saw that the flows into the Bitcoin ETFs and so forth really changed. So the flows really never recovered, and so retail was apparently somewhat shell-shocked by that day. And we saw outflows. The other thing that happened is that I think a lot of the institutional investors trade Bitcoin with a bit of a trend following mindset. And so we broke some of the moving averages that they tend to look at. And that is also reducing the source of demand. But the third point is what you were mentioning. And that is that the liquidity which we measure by bank reserves on the Fed balance sheet dropped by a bit more than 500 billion. And that happened because the Treasury increased the Treasury general